Analysis of a competitive market, part 2. In this particular part, we're going to talk about different government policies and incentives in order to boost the production of especially the agriculture sector, and these incentives, we will see that what is the price or what is the cost of these incentives to the society. For example, this is very common in agriculture sector to provide the support price. Normally support price is provided in order to protect the farmers, because agriculture sector is such a sector in which the output is produced at the same time. Like there is a harvesting season, and a harvesting season is for all farmers, so the supply is very large at that point. And when the supply is very large, what happens is that the equilibrium price or the market prices go down. So there is a possibility that the farmers suffer loss, and next year they decide, okay, I'm not going to grow this crop. And in order to protect this food security type of situation, so normally the governments allow support prices. Now when the government provides support prices means that they said, okay, this is the market price, like at the harvesting season, the market price for a wheat is this, but in order to protect the farmers, we say, okay, no, this is the price in market, but we say that the price should be of this, like higher than the equilibrium price or higher than the market clearing price. Now when they set this price higher, so definitely the consumer is going to buy less. So then what is going to happen to the surplus? If we left the surplus, then the farmer is going to be suffer more. No. But in this case, when there is a support price, so there is a mechanism that the excess supply is going to be purchased by the government. So that's the way that it works as a support price. So here is an example. It's a support price set by the government above free market level and maintained by government purchases of the excess supply. So as I mentioned, governmental purchases of the excess supply, so they purchase it. Now here is the case, like we see, to maintain a price PS, the PS is above the equilibrium price is P naught, but the government set the price PS, like we are saying, S means support price. So when they set it above, what is going to happen? The demand is from the general public is this much, and when the demand is this much, so it's going to be reduced the consumer surplus, but at the same time it's increased the producer surplus by just this one, and the producer is lost this by this B. So this is not a big change in the producer. So what they said, the government said, okay, we will buy the rest of this. So by this way, the government is going to buy this much, and in order to keep the prices high. So maintain a price PS above the market clearing price P0, the government buys a quantity QG. Quantity QG. So there's a demand curve shift because of the QG. So the gain to the producer is A plus B plus D. That's going to be gain to the producer A, B and D. However, the consumer is losing only A and B. So we can say, what is the loss to the consumer? A plus minus A minus B. And what is the gain to the producer? A plus B plus D. So ultimately, the benefit of the overall economy is D. But no, that's not the case, because the government has to pay a price, and that price is the PS, this is the height of this rectangle, Q2 minus Q1. So this whole rectangle is the cost to the government. So there is a gain, net gain to the economy D, but this whole rectangle, which is PS into Q2 minus Q1, is the cost, and that cost is paid by the taxpayers' money. So we have to keep it in mind. So as I mentioned, this is the change in consumer surplus, negative, minus A minus B. This is the positive change towards the producer, but this is the cost to the government, and overall we see that D minus Q2 minus Q1 into PS is the cost to this support price. Sometimes it happens like there is no support price, but they say, or they use techniques that the quantity should be reduced. Now, the objective of keeping the quantity low or supply low so that the price is going to be higher, and that's going to benefit the producer again. So here we see that the government say, okay, we want that the supply should be like this. The supply curve should be like this. Now, in this case, what is going to happen? The producer is going to get this benefit, but at the same time, he's going to lose that. The producer is going to lose it this much, and D, definitely that's also a loss to the producer. So we see that to maintain a price PS above the market clearing price P0, the government can restrict supply Q1 either by imposing production quotas limitation to everyone, like we see in the case of a taxi cab in New York, medallions, or by giving producers a financial incentive to reduce output. And that's what we call it as an acreage limitation in agriculture. In US, it is quite common that the government give incentives to the farmer not to cultivate certain acres of land to grow wheat or any other crop. They will get it the benefit in the way that how many acres they are not cultivating. So by this not cultivation, they get the benefit. So for an incentive to work, it must be at least as large as B plus C plus D. So because B plus C plus D is the loss to the producer, so producers say that if we get an incentive which is greater than B, C and B plus C plus D, then they are going to apply this supply restriction, which would be the additional profit earned by the planting. Given the higher prices PS, the cost to the government is definitely the cost to the government is B plus C plus D, but it is still less than the excess supply purchase like we support price. So here here's an example like what we discussed. So again, the consumer is losing the same, whether it's a quota or a price support or a production quota. So the consumer is losing the same. However, the producer is getting A minus C plus payment for not producing. So this is overall gain A plus B plus D, as I mentioned. This is the gain to the producer. So if we see that minus A minus B, so eliminate only D left, but at the same time the D minus B minus C minus D. So B minus C is the minus B minus C is the overall loss to the economy when we are following a production quota. Here is an example. Like if you see this example carefully, this is a demand curve or demand in 1981 in US for wheat. This is the supply for wheat in 1981, and this is the demand for wheat in 1981. Now, if we equate these two, we can figure it out that the price and the equilibrium price. Equilibrium price is 4.36 if you look at this one carefully. But the government wants to keep the price at 3.7. Now, in order to keep the 3.7, how they can do this 3.7? So the government should have to buy 120 million bushels of wheat, like shift the demand curve with QG. And how much is the QG? 122 million. Now 122 million bushels of wheat, the government increased the market clearing price from 3.46 to 3.70. Now how we can determine, this is the total demand. You can see here, this is the total demand plus we add up here QG. We add up here QG. Now how much that QG is, if we equate with the quantity supplied like this one and solve it. So when we solve it, we see that QG is 506 P minus 150. Now P, they want to keep it as 3.7, so we can find it out that they have to buy 120 million of bushels. Loss to the consumer, this A, and we see here A, that's a and B, that's a loss to the consumer. So we can figure it out, this minus A minus B is 624. 624. Cost to the government 3.70 into 120, so it's a 451.5 million. Total cost of the program is 624 plus 451.50, that is going to be $1,075 million. and gain to the producer is A plus B plus C, which is 368. If you add up A plus B plus C, we can get it this change like 368. So we see that cost is this much and the gain is this much. So it means that overall there is a cost. Supporting the price of wheat in 1996, the government, the U.S. Congress passed a new farm bill named the Freedom to Farm Law. The farm law eliminated production quotas for wheat, corn, rice, and other products, and gradually reduced government purchases and subsidies through 2003. We saw that the market clearing price of the wheat in 2007 has increased to about $6 per bushel. The supply and the demand curve in 2007 were as follows. So this is our demand and supply curve in 2007 for a wheat. We can check to see the market clearing prices for 2,150 million bushels. By equating these two, you can solve it. So in 2002, the Farm Security and Rural Investment Act reinstated subsidies for most crops, in particular grains and cottons. It called the government to issue fixed direct payment to producers. Congress revisited agriculture subsidy in 2007, and the subsidies were either maintained or increased, thus making the burden on US taxpayers even higher. Recently, however, the pendulum was swung back towards eliminating subsidies, and the 2014 Farm Bill eliminated direct payments, which has been provided annually to producers and landowners of covered commodities. So we see these are the policy measures. They introduce the subsidies, and then they remove it, and then they reintroduce it. So this is the pendulum that is going to and fro. The same is the case with the taxi situation or a taxi licenses in New York. We call it as a medallions. The city of New York limit the number of taxis by issuing a limited number of, this is again a quota restrictions. In 2011, there were 13,150 medallions in New York, roughly the same numbers in 1937. So you see that's around 80 or 70 years, there is no change in the number of taxi services or taxi licenses in New York. So medallions can be bought and sold by the companies that own them, and that's the reason that the medallion prices goes up and up, and it gonna goes in millions. So in 1937 there were plenty of medallions to go around, so they had a little value. By 1947 the value of the medallions has increased to 2,500, or by 1980 to 55,000, and by 2011 it is $880,000 per medallion, because the limited numbers. But of course that value dropped sharply if the city starts sharing more medallions. So the New York taxi companies that collectively own the 13,150 available medallions have done everything possible to prevent the city from issuing any more, and have succeeded in their efforts. If the city was to issue another 7,000 medallions for the total of about 20,000, demand and supply would equilibrate at a price of about 3,500 per medallion. You see 5,000 decrease, 500,000 decrease per medallion price if they increase this supply by 7,000. Still a lot, but just not enough to lease cab or run a taxi business and still make a profit. The entry, now this is the situation, and this is what we call it as a change in technology. So the entry of Uber, Lyft, and other rideshare services that allow you to use an app or your smartphone to request a ride to the destination of your choice. These services have taken a good deal of business away from traditional taxi cabs, reducing the demand for the medallions. And that's the reason a few years ago, when these services were very new and they are entering in different cities of the US or in Canada, so the taxi drivers are always against these services, and they resisted. In Toronto, I remember there was a in real actual fight between the Uber services and the taxi drivers. So why can't I find a taxi medallion in New York City? The demand curve shows D shows the quantity of medallions. So we see that the quantity of medallions are constant, like this one. This is the the demand curve shows this. I mix it. This is the supply curve. This is the supply curve, and this one is the demand curve. The demand curve D shows the quantity of medallions demanded by the taxi companies as a function of the price of a medallion. The supply curve S shows the number of medallions that would be sold by current owners as a function of a price. New York limits the quantity as 13,150, so the supply curves become vertical and intersect demand curve at 880 at the market. So these are the prices of not the ride per kilometer, it's a price of a medallion itself. So by the 2016, the demand curve has shifted. So the demand curve shifted inward because of these new services. The prices go down to, you see here, the demand curve shift, and this is the price. The price of taxi medallions in New York, Chicago, and Boston. So the prices of medallion increased from 2006 to 2012 because supply was constrained and demand was growing, but the ride-share service like Uber and Lyft entered the market, shifting the demand curve to the left. So you see here there is an initial increase, but now everywhere in the world the taxi medallion or licensed plates prices are decreasing for taxi everywhere. Now, the last thing what we want to discuss is a tariff, like import quotas. Tariffs, we use the word for when we are imposing tax for importing something from outside the country. So import quota or import tariff, these are the two words. Quotas means quantitative restriction for imports, and tariff means that it's a tax on import. So import quota limit on the quantity of goods that can be imported, and tariff tax is an imported goods. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. So import tariff or import quota eliminate imports. So in the free market, the domestic price equals the world price. Like if there is no restriction of import quota or import tariff, then the world market price or the world price and the domestic price is same. But whenever there is a restriction, like here you see, so this is our local market. So in a free market, the domestic price equals the world price, and as total quantity QD is consumed, of which QS is the supplied domestically and the rest by imported. So when imports are eliminated, the price increased to P0. So this is the situation. Like here, you see at this price. Now this price is, demand is this much and the supply is this much, but this is a domestic supply. So this rest is covered through imports, So ultimately the buyer is getting whatever they are willing to buy, so by this way. But if we put a restriction, so the price will increase from this to this point and the exchange is going to take place at this point. So the gain to the producer is tripartite A. The loss to the consumer is A plus B plus C. So the deadweight loss is B plus C. So deadweight loss is B plus C when we impose a restriction. Now keep it in mind, this supply is a domestic producer supply. So the domestic producer is going to get a benefit if we impose a import quota or import tariff, and by this way you see here this benefit goes to the producer, domestic producer, local producer, and this is the consumer's cost. Consumer's cost is this A plus B plus C, but the producer is getting A, so the remaining net cost is B plus C. Import tariff or quotas, general case, when imports are reduced, the domestic price is increased from PW to P star. This can be achieved by quotas or by tariff. Both are possible. Like if you restrict the quota or you impose a quota, quantitative restriction, or you can apply a tariff to increase the price. So by this way, they're both working as same manner. So, but the impacts are different. So trapezoid A is a gain to the domestic producer. The loss to the consumer is A plus B plus C plus D. So A plus B plus C plus D. So that's a consumer loss, but the gain is for the producer is A. If the tariff is used, the government gain D. This tax is going to be getted by the government, and from the revenue, and the net domestic loss is B plus C, this B and this C. But if it is a quota, in case of a quota, the government is not generating any revenue, then in that case the society's loss is B plus C plus D, and D is going to benefit to the exporter of the other country. So here is an example, very clear. In recent years, the world price of sugar has been between 10 to 28 cents per pound, while the US price has been 30 to 40 cents per pound. Why? Because of the trade quota, or a trade import tariffs or import quotas. By restricting imports, the US government protect the 4 million domestic sugar industry, 4 billion, which would virtually be put out of the business if it had to compete with the low cost foreign producers. The policy has been used for US sugar producers but bad for consumers. Sugar market in 2016, that is the situation. US production 17.9 billion pounds. How much is the demand or a consumption is 24. So we can see very clearly that this is the demand, this is the supply by the domestic. So there is a shortage of 6.1 or something like this. If you subtract it, is going to be how much? The US price is 27, world price is 17, just 17. So you see here, this is the US supply, this is the US demand. At the 17%, world price, US production would have been only about 8 billion pounds, and US consumption is about 26.7 billion, of which this billion pounds would have been imported. If they allow the free movement of the sugar, then in that case, what is going to happen? There is a 18.7 billion pound shortage, and that is going to be import from the other countries. But fortunately, the US producers import was limited to only 6.1 million. So they only allow, there is a demand for 18.7 billion pounds, but they only allow 6.1 billion pounds. So the effect of a specific tax, if they impose a tax, so at the world price of 17 cents per pound, about 26.7 billion pounds of sugar would have been consumed in 2016, of which all about 8 billion pounds would have been imported. Restricting import to 6.1 billion pound caused the US market to go up by 10 cents. So the cost to the consumer is A plus B plus C plus D was about 2.5 billion, A, B, C and D. That's, if you calculate this whole area, you can calculate it because the values are there. You can calculate this whole area, that is about 2.5 billion. The gain to the producer was trapezoid A only, this, and you can calculate this area, which is 1.3 billion. So rectangle D, 610 million, was a gain to those foreign producers who obtained quotas allotment, and this triangle B and C represents the deadweight loss of about 631 million, that is this B and C is a deadweight loss. The impact of a tax or a subsidy, then again we are going to discuss in a different scenario, that what is an impact of a tax or a subsidy. In general, it's not related to import or export, but that's a general. So specific tax of a certain amount of a money per unit sold, that's what we see here. PB is the price including the tax paid by the buyer price. PB is buyer price, and PS is the seller price, and P naught is an equilibrium price, right? But the seller, there is a price, there is a tax, like whatever the equilibrium price is, whenever you buy 1 unit, you have to pay a certain amount of a tax. Now when we calculate here, the burden of the tax is split evenly, because we are assuming that it is evenly between the buyer. So buyer loses A plus B, this whole area, and the seller is losing this whole area, so D plus C. The government earns A plus D, so the deadweight loss is again the B and C. The deadweight loss is again B and C. Now the market clearing requires four conditions to be satisfied after the tax is in place. Like we see here, QD, quantity demanded, is equal to QD into PB, that's a buyer's price. QS is equal to QS into PS, that's a seller price, and QD is equal to QS. So we can equate it. This PB, QD PB is equal to QS PS. So we can get it like PS minus PB, like a price the seller is getting minus the price the buyer is paying. The difference is the tax amount that is going to the government kitty. Now here we assumed, and the shape of the demand and supply curve is like this, that the tax is splitted between the buyer and seller equally, but that's not the case. The case is this, that the buyer and seller is paying the tax according to their elasticities. So if you look at the first graph, and you can easily identify that the demand is inelastic, the steeper curves, and the supply is elastic, flatter curve. In this case, when the tax is imposed, per unit tax, so the major portion is paid by the buyer because the demand is inelastic, and a small portion is paid by the seller. If, on the other hand, the second graph is representing quite differently or opposite to that, the demand is elastic and the supply is inelastic, in that case the major portion of the tax is paid by the seller and the small portion is paid by the buyer. If the demand is very elastic relative to supply, the burden of the tax falls mostly on buyer. If the demand is very elastic relative to supply, it falls mostly on seller. So by using the following pass-through formula, we can calculate the percentage of tax that is passed through to the consumer. Pass-through fraction is ES, elasticity of supply, divided by elasticity of supply minus elasticity of demand. So here is a case of a subsidy. Subsidy is again that's a very opposite to the tax. In tax cases, you see, in tax cases the seller is getting less than what the buyer is paying, but in subsidy the seller is getting more than what the buyer is paying. Why? Because the difference is paid by the government. So subsidy payment reduces the buyer's price below the seller's price. It's a negative tax. A subsidy can be thought of as a negative tax. Like a tax, the benefit of the subsidy is split between the buyer and the seller depending upon relative elasticities of, again, the subsidy is also divided among the buyer and the seller, or we call it as a subsidy incidence or a tax incidence in case of a tax. But this split is based on elasticities. So we can say here QD is equal to QD into PB, which is the buyer price, and QS is equal to QS into PS, which is the seller's price. So QD is equal to QS. So we can say that PS minus PB is equal to subsidy. So you have to understand the difference. Seller price minus buyer price is tax, and subsidy is seller price minus buyer price is subsidy. So it's you see here, PS minus PB is equal to T, and that's PS minus PB is equal to S. Now here is a practical example on a gas. There is a tax. So this is our demand function or a demand curve for gasoline. This is a supply curve for a gasoline, and we can see that if we equate it, we can get it as supply must equal the quantity. But there is a case like PB minus PS is equal to 1, right? It's a tax per gallon. So we can write it here, 209 minus 23 PB is equal to 83 plus 190 PS. But we know that PS is equal to or PB is equal to 1 plus PB, 1 plus PB, PS, sorry, PB is equal to 1 plus PS. So we place in case of PS, 209 23 PS plus 1 is equal to, so this one we plug in there, by calculating PB is equal to 1 minus PS or 1 plus PS. This is the same thing, right? PS. So when we change this and we apply this, then what we get it, like this PS is this much, and if you plug in this value, so where is PB? And we find out the quantity. This is our quantity. So annual revenue from the tax is T into Q, which is 130 into 1, so 130 billion per year. And deadweight loss we can calculate it is 1 billion into 10 billion gallons per year into half, so $5 billion. The price of a gasoline at the pump increases from $3 to 3.45, and the quantity sold from 140 to 130. Annual revenue from the taxes 130 billion, then two triangles shows the deadweight loss. So this is all what we have discussed in this whole chapter. Now this way, the one thing what we learn from this whole chapter is that you have to first make yourself very comfortable about what is producer surplus, what is consumer surplus, and we see many policy measures that is going to affect the producer surplus or a consumer surplus, as well as the government revenue. We have to keep it in mind. Third player as the government revenue. So what is net impact to the economy is what is a gain or a loss to the consumer, what is the gain or loss to the producer, and what is the benefit the government is getting, and all together is the net impact on the economy. So this is all what I want to share with you regarding the analysis of competitive market based on consumer surplus and producer surplus. So stay tuned. Thank you.